Did somebody just join? Oh yeah, it looks like Anush just joined.
Yes, probably most likely. Cool. Is if you just send me that link and then I can post.
Yeah.
Cool. Thank you. I'll do that now. What is the LOTD?
Hello there, how you guys doing?
Good. Hi, Anush. How are you?
All right, I'm good. Am I
Hello.
first? Hi there, how you doing?
Good, I think. I think we're just sorting ourselves out.
Okay, cool. So it says live on YouTube. What does that mean? Are we a YouTube star
Yes,
after
that's
this?
right.
Okay. Well, I'll just mute myself and let me know when I'm needed or when Roger joins in and things like that. Yep.
Sounds good. Thank
Cool.
you. Hold on. I should probably stop my video right now because that looks terrible. Is there any way we can change? Will the live stream Stephen, are you there?
Yeah, I'm here, Holly.
I'm about to post on your page. Can you quickly tell me? I just want to make sure that I've deleted it because the thumbnail for the live stream is me like half blink, like mid blink is what's coming. But I want to make sure that I've like deleted it effectively when I'm posting in the pages because that would be really embarrassing if that's, oh no, it is. Oh,
I'm sorry, I'm not sure. Maybe if you redo the link.
let's try that because that is awful.
It's all right.
That's embarrassing. No, that's okay. No, still.
Hello. Looks like Roger just came in.
Cool. Oh, I don't know how to edit it. Oh well, I'll just suck it up.
You can just remove the picture. It'll keep the link.
That's what I thought I'd done.
Ah.
But it keeps, even after I've removed the picture, it like pops up. Oh wow.
Oh, that's weird.
This is just, I'll see if I can do it quickly now. Oh my gosh. Sorry. Hi Roger, I'm just sorting out my own vanity. I'm posting the link and it's linking through to the live stream where I'm mid blink in an awkward position. So How are you?
I'm fine, thanks. You?
Yeah, good.
Hi, Anush.
Have you got many people in your bubble?
2 humans, 1 cat.
Important. I think our cat feels like he's the most loved member of the family at the moment, which in truth he probably is.
Yes. Ours is outside somewhere at the moment and won't come in, and he's quite old and he's not that well. He hasn't got long to live, so I get a bit twitchy if he doesn't come in by sunset. I've been out calling for him, but he hasn't arrived yet, so hopefully he will by the time we get off this.
Yeah.
Oh no.
What type of cat is he?
He's a lovely ginger cat who's about 13, 14 years old.
Yeah, wow. That's a decent, don't know cat years conversions, but that's a decent.
That's fair distance. We've had some go to 19 or 20, but only about 3 or so over the space of 40 years. So.
Yeah. Well loved then, if they're happy to chill out for that long.
Definitely. What sort's your cat?
He's a British Blue, actually. He's yeah. Yeah, he's got a bit of attitude. He's cool. Very groovy.
Thank you so much for coming, Roger
Yeah,
and Anuj.
both of you.
Yeah.
Really
nice.
appreciate it, especially given the short time frame. I know that everyone seems to be far busier these days, actually, given that everyone's working from home.
So are the other participants going to be audio only, chat only, or what?
So basically, we're live on YouTube at the moment, and so students will watch us on the YouTube live stream link, and then they'll comment on the live stream, or we've set up like an anonymous form that they can make comments on. And so throughout the time that we have, I'll kind of put some of their questions to you, and engage in that way with them. So yeah, I've got that set up. But yeah, we can start soon, and if you and Anuj are just happy to introduce yourselves and talk a little bit about what's happening in your careers and your stance on the moot, that would be great.
Hi there, Roger. How are you?
Hi, I'm well, thanks, Anush. Good to see you.
Yeah, likewise. It's sort of
Just been
seeing
setting up
each
your
other in
background, have you?
Yes, my other background is I'll share it with you, which is the dog at the back, and she'll start barking, and then there is just stuff, and there's kitchen, and then I have a glass of wine as well. So hopefully
No,
that won't count.
the
I mean,
essential.
I think, but I have to say that when you're doing online teaching, at the end of the day, you just need something. Because when I switch off, I'm not drinking right now, but I'm just saying that when I switch off, there'll be plenty of emails to go through. So it's just very difficult. Where does work start and home life begin? It's just all merged into one bubble.
Yes, I know. Finding that balance is quite tough, even though it's been 6 weeks. I think most of us are still struggling to find that.
It is. I mean, and just so many new things that have happened and changes and things. But, you know, I think we are really good. We are soldiering on, and e-learning is the way to go. That's what I'm saying.
How did you manage your conference with 200 people? How did you guys do that?
Is that Roger or? Yeah, Roger.
You, Anuj, you said you were speaking to 200. You had 200
no, so
people.
that was in China, and we were doing. It's actually not 200. It was 2,000 people.
Wow.
So they don't use Zoom. They use something called as I can't remember the name of the program, but it's just like Zoom. And then they use something called as WeChat. So our the sessions that we were doing on online learning and things, there were people from the US, there were people from Australia, my colleagues and myself, and then the rest was sort of people from mainland China, which we couldn't understand any of it. And then we weren't sure when we had to speak. And so there would be obviously, I think, language, and then we would get a cue, you start now. And it was broadcast on WeChat, and apparently there were 2,000 people. So there you go.
Wow.
Joys of technology.
Yeah, crazy. That's crazy. What about you, Roger? Have you been doing much online live teaching?
Live stuff's only been postgrads with 20 students, and the rest of it's been recording lectures and imagining a class of 100 on the other side of the computer. And I'm getting better at it, but I find it really quite bizarre. The first couple were really stressful. And at the end, I apologized to the class and said, let me know if there's anything I could do to improve it. I haven't had any feedback except people saying we appreciate you doing them. But I'm getting better at them now.
I think a lot of people are stacking up their recordings and I will do that and I will do that. So maybe, Roger, you'll get feedback that was a fantastic lecture. Maybe in 2 weeks time or something like that, when they're ready to take on that.
Could be.
As the deadlines loom.
Yeah, when the deadlines, yes.
I found with the first one, I sat at my computer and after about 2 or 3 minutes, I thought, no, this isn't working. I'm just talking and it'll sound monotonous after 50 minutes. So I set myself up to stand and imagine the class sort of a little bit behind the computer. And then I started sort of not exactly shouting, but trying to declaim a bit. And I was aware, I mean, I couldn't be seen because it was only the slides and my voice, but I was aware that my arms were going all over the place.
Oh, that's quite useful when you're doing VR and AR sort of thing, that you're wearing that gadget and you're going all over the place and it happens to be just you rather than anyone else.
Yes.
Cool.
It's been an interesting experience.
Yeah, I don't envy your guys' jobs at the moment. I feel like especially the faculty has been put under a lot of pressure and lecturers are just having to pump things out at the moment, but it's you know, much appreciated by all of us, definitely. Because my supervisor for like the research option is Bridget Cool, and I know that she's been under a bit of stress about admissions or something like that, about coming up with working out how to do the admissions process. So yeah, we'll see.
Do you get any chance to talk to her at the moment? Because she's usually busy.
Oh, I can only imagine. I chatted to her today actually for about 7 minutes, just briefly to say hi, and yeah, I can't imagine how busy she would be.
Well, she's doing a great job. She's the sort of faculty conduit to the academic program committee at the university, and
oh right, okay,
got people on all sides sort of wanting her to do stuff. She always does it with a smile and does really competently. It's great.
Yeah, I
mean, I have to say she's very prompt as well. Like she might just respond to your email straight away, sort of thing. And I think that's really, and especially when you're asking sort of trivial questions, I suppose she responds quite quickly. So yeah, really, she is multitasking, and she'll be writing something up and then suddenly there'll be an email, and so it's really good.
No, see, because you all have lots of different hats that none of us as the student body gets to see. So we only see like one little bit of your work, and you've all got massive stuff happening behind the scenes. So it's quite interesting having just a little taste of what that kind of research side looks like and those sorts of things that are actually going on. Oh, all right, 2 minutes. How are we going, Stephen?
Yeah, so we have some people coming in now. Everything's pretty much set up, so we can start on time.
Cool. All right, we'll give it a couple of minutes and then.
Stephen, is that brioche loaves at the back of you? It's one of my favorite things. So at the back of you, there's a bakery, I believe, and that's sort of
Yes.
stacks and stacks of brioche. And all I can think of is bread and butter pudding.
It's this one here.
Yeah, that one there. Yeah, that looks more like a ciabatta bread or something like that. But there's stacks of nice, yummy brioches. So once that is done, could we get some? Could we be sent some?
Yes. Yeah,
I'd love to.
absolutely. We can contribute some of that.
Yeah. I just
Good.
thought I'd surround myself in bread.
Oh, good.
Yeah.
As
We-
you
we
can see,
can
I'm
arrange for that,
doing on
Anush.
e-learning,
Yeah.
and I couldn't find anything. I was trying to find something like a sort of a funny picture, but when I did put it up, it was a dog saying, I'm sitting in a bunk, sort of, I don't know what it was saying, but when I cropped it up and I put it up on Zoom, all I could see was the belly of the dog rather than the rest of the stuff. So I had to remove it and get one of these things. So it's I suppose, the next best thing.
Yeah. I've updated my computer to try and get a live background and it just doesn't seem to want to happen. So yeah, you're lucky. There's some pretty cool ones you can get. I've seen some pretty nice holiday destinations coming through on different chats.
Well, that's what I want to do. I'm just going to be, this is
A little bit
Venice. Posh. Yeah, so this is the buffet exhibition in Venice. And you can see this chandelier, while we've got time, this chandelier is made from Murano glasses. And so Murano is a little island next to Venice, and they make these. And so this was estimated to be about 14 million euros. So I had to take a photo of that. You can't see the artwork, which is in the black wall behind it, but that's equally impressive too. Or you could see one of these, which is Jeff Koons, who's an American artist, and this is known as Tulips, and it's in Los Angeles, and it's sort of giant tulips that he made, and they look like this. Or if you want to go really physiology, then I've got lungs as well.
Oh, nice. Very
so
nice.
I'm catering to all needs, if you like.
Absolutely.
This is what Zoom has done for me. And this is the dog that I was telling you about. So there you go.
Right.
And I do
Okay.
have an official one as well. There we go. And I'll stick to that.
Apologies. My younger brother is returning home from a surf. All right. 6:32. Should we kick off then and get started? So I get what you mean. It's weird not speaking to an audience, but I know they're out there somewhere. So welcome everyone to our speaking event as part of AIMS Digital Health Week. We are lucky enough to have Roger Booth and Anuj join us, and we're going to be discussing the teaching of technical literacy and should it be compulsory during medical school. So without further ado, if Roger and Anuj could both introduce yourselves, what you do, what your experience is with technological literacy, and their position on whether or not it should be compulsory in medical schools. So Roger, if we could start with you.
Kia ora koutou. Thanks for the invitation. And we were talking earlier about the strangeness of talking to a lot of people who you can't see, and we're sort of getting used to that. But I'm grateful for this technology. Otherwise, the last 6 weeks would have been virtually impossible for most people around the world to teach. I'm coming to the end of my career at the university. I guess I've been thinking about retiring for a little while, but maybe sometime in the next 5 years, depending on what happens. And my background is in immunology and virology initially. It's what I did my PhD in. And then probably about 20 or 30 years ago, I guess now, I got interested in how the immune system might be affected by the way we think and feel and vice versa. And so I sort of have done a lot of research in an area called psychoimmunology. My current role is as a phase 1 director in the medical program at Auckland. And that means I'm in charge of years 2 and 3 of the medical program. And I love teaching, and I've been involved in teaching for pretty much all of my academic life, which is getting on for 40 years now, I guess. Maybe Anuj can introduce himself, and then we can talk about technology after we know who he is.
Yeah. Thank you, Roger. Kia ora, everyone. My name is Anuj Bhargava. Some of you might have seen me in the physiology teaching labs, the guy who's got all the dad jokes. I tried doing that with the year 2 sessions that we had on Zoom. But one of the main drawbacks of that was that all of my jokes, dad jokes that I thought were quite recent, were on Google already. And so students started Googling as I had the questions and my jokes, and they came up with the obvious answers for my dad jokes. So it fell flat. Anyway, so my name is Anuj Bhargava, and I am a professional teaching fellow in the Department of Physiology, and I have been involved, unlike Roger, this is my 14th year teaching, and time flies when you're having fun, they say. But I certainly can say that I've really enjoyed my teaching role. My past life was a clinical, just like yourself. I did MBCHP, worked in clinical areas, and then suddenly decided with my I did a teaching role in Otago University. That's where I sort of kind of decided that was something that really was of my interest. And then onwards to Auckland, and this is my 14th year teaching. My interest is about blended learning, and it's quite recent, is using technology, but still maintaining that face-to-face experience, because I think you make rapport and you build up relationships. And then when the students become happy, learning happens after that. But this COVID-19 and all of that drama that we all had to go together as if no one signed up for it. We all had to be on lockdown, and it's taught so many important lessons to us. It's and I'm really thankful to the AIM team, I believe, and Holly and Steve, and I'm not too sure about the other S, which I couldn't read very clearly, to invite us to share. And I think Roger and I have been involved with sort of in teaching and technology, and Roger a lot more than I have. So yes, we are very happy to be here and to share our ideas with you. Thank you.
Cool. All right. So obviously, given the current climate, we have had to change our teaching quite a bit. Maybe if you could just highlight some of the ways that you guys are using technology to help with medical teaching, and also maybe some of the trouble that you've had or things that you see have been barriers to learning.
Okay, shall I kick off, Anuj?
Yes, Roger, absolutely.
Okay. We've been using a variety of technological approaches for medical teaching for some time. And for example, in years 2 and 3, there are several online learning experiences which the students go through. And they've been great since the lockdown, because we've had to do nothing to those. They just continue as they would have when the students were coming to campus and learning, because they were always done on the computer as well. The biggest challenges for us, I think, in the last 6 weeks have been to make lecture material available in a form that the students could interact with, but recognizing that technology isn't the same for everybody, even if they might be technologically literate. Depending on where they are in New Zealand, in most cases, and a few overseas, but mostly in New Zealand, some students don't have particularly good access. And so we have spent a lot of time in the medical program talking about what we can do and what's going to potentially disadvantage students who've got limited internet access. And in fact, it's not just us, the university has been talking about that as well. So there are times when we've thought it'd be great to do interactive Zoom sessions with the class, and potentially the medical class, 280 students, and it could cope with that, but not everyone would be able to participate. And so we've had to sort of, one of the challenges being to say what is valid to do live and what's better to do asynchronously, record it, post it, and then have people send in questions through Piazza or email or some other format like that. And what we've tended to do for the last 6 weeks is to say small groups of maybe less than 30, we can run online live teaching of those. Anything larger, we'll record it and make it asynchronous. The second challenge, and Anuj will talk a little bit about some of this as well, I suspect, is teaching that you can't do in that way, like clinical learning, where you need to have a patient and learn how to take a history, how to do examinations, etc. And the other one is laboratories, which I'll leave Anuj to talk about. For the hands-on clinical teaching, what we've had to do is say, well, all we can really do is post videos that show you how to do these things. You can practice, and then we can have you ask questions, but it's not ideal, but it's better than nothing. So those have been the main features of how we've been able to do things. And without modern technology, we would have been floundering. So I'll hand over to Anuj.
No, absolutely. Thank you, Roger. I absolutely agree that given the time we had, I think I can safely say for the organization, with the University of Auckland, that we have structure, and especially in case of Canvas, we had the scaffolding of a learning management system. It's not ideal, but it's better than what we had. And that allowed us to have lecture recordings. We had information from dating back about 2 or 3 years ago. So if we didn't have things available in such a short period of time, notice, such as about 4 days, we were told that we are moving from level 2 or level 3 to level 4, and with the lockdown. So if we didn't have that scaffold of Canvas, it would have been a lot difficult. We were fortunate with the funding that we had from the medical program and within the school, that we were able to get Kura Cloud, which some of you did use. And that allowed us to do blended learning when we were in the lab. And it worked quite well because it took away the jargon of usual physiology equipment. And I think some of you might have experienced face-to-face sessions over there. Remember those times where you were doing pre-lab and you forgot to do the pre-lab, and you came to the lab and the lab was locked for you, those sort of things, and you rushed and did it online and that sort of thing. So there was a bit of, we were dabbling with that. What we did find that we could transition easily onto online teaching, but when we actually went on to do online teaching, that sense of face-to-face teaching and seeing essays and M's and instead of people, and especially as you've just come out of your musculoskeletal module, and you still have to see cardiovascular module and the respiratory module, which are quite conceptual. I did find that, as Roger said, that you could have videos, you could have simulated data. We could break you into small little groups of 15 to 10 to 15 people with a teaching assistant to help you go through the data. But the whole process of acquiring an experiential learning and constructive sort of attitude of how did I get this information? How does it relate to clinical session? That's what I feel the biggest challenge was for us, that how do you get everybody on board and to be able to see the clinical as well as sort of, I suppose, physiological mechanistic aspect of that knowledge. So it all became quite abstract that this data was obtained somehow, and then we are going to analyze the data. So it became a very mechanical evaluation and analysis aspect rather than actually looking in thinking more, how does it relate to our own human body? So I suppose in so many words, what I'm saying is that face-to-face learning that happened from within the lab was somehow lost, and it couldn't, much as we tried to recreate this, it just was a bit short.
Okay, that's definitely one of the challenges. Just coming back to the moot this evening, which is, should teaching of technical literacy be compulsory in medical school? I just want to quickly make very clear what your guys' stance is on this. Roger, if we could start with you again.
Okay, thanks, Holly. I am not totally clear what technological literacy means, because when I looked up some various definitions, there seems to be about 5 or 6 different components. But if we take some of them, the first and obvious one is, are people competent at using a computer, using particular software, using a variety of platforms, etc.? And in the 21st century, I would say that that's equivalent to saying, can people use a ballpoint pen in the 20th century? And did we teach at the university how to use a pen? No. So if you, I mean, I'm 69 and I'm a technophile and I'm reasonably competent on things, but a lot of my colleagues who might be 20 or 30 years younger don't have that same literacy, whereas all the students coming through are born in the late 20th century or early 21st century and have been brought up with laptops, phones, all manner of electronic platforms now, and their use of them is second nature. So can we teach that sort of the use of the things? I don't think effectively. I think the students should come in with that sort of knowledge anyway, otherwise they won't have got through to the level they're at. The second part of technological literacy, though, is how to use the tools effectively for learning. And that's something that I think we probably do need to focus a lot more on, in as much as saying, for example, if I do a Google search and I come up with 10 items, the top ranked items, how do I know which ones to believe? And it's about, that's not about the technology though, that's about evaluating and learning how to evaluate literature. And it's semi technological and independent, but it's certainly a very important aspect to learning, not just in medicine, but across all university courses. But it certainly is essential in medicine, because patients have access to the same internet that you have as a doctor, but they don't have the skills to be able to say, no, that's crap, that's something you need to read, that has some value, but it's not actually been done in a way that's verifiable, so we have to question it. And that's the sort of skill that I think we need to be focusing on, rather than teaching how to use particular bits of technology or particular bits of software which are going to change. So I'll hand over to Anuj. We can come back to it later if need be.
No, absolutely. I would just like to sort of reinforce what Roger said, that I am certainly of the opinion that we should have some sort of a, I wouldn't call it as a module for e-learning or something like that, but certainly need to know a few things, such as, I mean, as basic as Word and Excel. You come across a lot of people who would never used any of this. And like, you know, some of you might be doing research in your, as an elective. There's a lot of programs that you will be using, such as MedTech, you know, for getting patient data and things like that. You need to have some sort of element of being able to discern, you know, how, what systems, what parameters, what sort of, you know, searches you should be looking for, if that was an example. Things like a lot of web tools that have been used, simulation devices, which I suppose if you're unable to attend a session, things like that, there are lots of resources that a lot of universities such as Harvard as well as Yale have come, and they've got these modules that students such as medical students can actually do to upskill, and they get, you know, extra points, and that allows them to have more of a bespoke learning experience, which is that if you've got those badges, if you like, then your learning journey will be quite different to your peer, which has had not much of those sort of experience with that. So I think there's such vast experience and advances, if you like, in this field, that I think and especially with such migration, not with COVID-19 we can't, but I'm sure this is temporary. You are likely to go overseas, you are likely to go and study overseas, and you are going to be seeing a lot more of these sort of tools that have been used. So I think there is a very, very strong case of actually having these skills that are absolutely essential for a medical student.
Yeah, and some medical students may say to that, we have so many lectures already, we have so much coursework, we don't want to have another lecture to learn those skills. But you're kind of saying that it's an additional tool that people can choose to self-educate themselves and achieve those badges.
Yeah, I mean, and one of the things that I think COVID-19 has taught us, especially us as teachers, as well as I hope the students, is self-determination and self-learning, that you are the driver of your learning. If you want to do well, you will follow your timetable to the T. You will work. If you've got an 8 o'clock lecture, perhaps maybe not get up at 8 o'clock, but maybe 9 o'clock, but you will do and review those things. So I think that's the same thing applies over here as well, that although you've got all of this technology, but it's entirely up to a student to take that module and make the most of that.
Mm-hmm. So you're from the view that we need to make those resources available, but they shouldn't be compulsory. It needs to be student driven and reaching out and getting those opportunities and upskilling.
I would agree with that, but knowing a student population or a medical student population and being a medical student myself, if there was a resource that was there, I would very likely to use it, because we are all type A personalities. We all want to do well. And so I think it becomes more of a, rather than mandatory is a strong word, it's just something that if it's there, it's just like a AI, your academic integrity module. You have to do it. So, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Holly, can I throw in a couple of other things here, or are we going to go into another question?
Sure. No, go.
It seems to me that there are two facets to this that we haven't totally addressed.
Mm-hmm.
One of them you sort of touched on, and that was we don't want to add additional stuff to the curriculum.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things that several of us in phase one have been talking about for some years is, how do students learn now? And now I mean in the 21st century. And it doesn't matter that I'm technologically literate or my colleagues are, but we had our education predominantly at your level, in my case 50 years ago, and others 30 or 40 years ago, where things were a lot different. And so we are using, with a few tweaks, a system largely developed 1,000 years ago, which is somebody gets up and speaks in front of a lot of people, and they either write down notes, or now we give them notes, or they type it out or whatever. But that maybe doesn't fit well with the way students learn in the 21st century, because they haven't been brought up to learn in that way. So one of the things about technology that we are looking at seriously is, what should we be providing to facilitate students learning across a wide spectrum of learning styles, rather than saying, this is how you have to do it. You've got to front up at a lecture, and if you're not there, well, it's going to be available and you can watch it online. There may be other ways, and there certainly are other ways, that many students will learn more effectively. So that's one part of it. The other harks back to what I was saying before about most of us who are your teachers went through our formative education 30 to 60 years ago, where everything was different. And I've come to the conclusion that our brains are wired differently as a result of that. And that's not one way is better or worse, but we all know that neurons that fire together wire together. And during your early formative years, what you're exposed to conditions the way you learn in the future. So I'm beginning to think more and more that millennials have fundamentally different wiring that allows them to learn in a different way from what I could even conceive. And I might be able to help them do that, but it's only going to be with some insight from them saying, no, that doesn't work for us, this does.
Mm.
And that's what we probably need to be doing a little more of.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, interesting concept. I've just got a couple of questions here as well. One is said, if we're going to be given resources on technological literacy, why not other literacy? Why does technological literacy have priority over other languages if we want to treat it as a language? And how do you think it could potentially help us to communicate better with our patients, having a better understanding of technical literacy than as opposed to learning a language such as Te Reo?
Yeah, that's a really good point.
Mm.
I don't think they're mutually exclusive.
No.
And I think my take on it in terms of technological literacy is what I said earlier, that we assume that students have fundamental literacy.
Mm-hmm.
What we're teaching them is how to be discerning about what they find.
Yeah.
Now, in that sense, I don't consider technological literacy as a language.
No.
It's just a way of interacting with information.
Mm-hmm.
But learning Te Reo, I think, is a very good thing to be doing because of the cultural diversity and also the Treaty of Waitangi within New Zealand. And anyone who speaks more than one language knows that you think differently if you've got multiple languages that are informing the way your thinking process happens.
Mm.
What about you, Anush?
No, certainly. And I think we have to be a bit like what I meant with this module, if you like. I'll go back to that module of electronic learning. I think it just allows sort of to develop some skills that can be used strategically to learn better. And I think that's what I was implying to, that if we were technologically somehow a bit more, we were using a lot more technology in our learning, we are more likely to achieve a few things that if we were using our traditional model, if you like. So that's what I was hoping to achieve, is that allows us or empowers us to do things and learning in a more effective way. An example would that be that recorded lectures, they could be just static piece of work or recordings. It could be used in a flipped classroom. I mean, the whole concept of Eric Masur in Harvard, doing his physics lecture, he would record all his lectures. It wasn't getting used. And so what he did was he showed his class, this is in 1980s or something like that, and he just showed those lectures and he started asking questions in his live lectures. So that allowed students to review the lectures prior to coming to those lectures. So that's what I meant, is having those skills to how do I maximize my learning experience with the use of technology.
Okay.
Yeah.
And also, as you were saying, using technology to find what is relevant and what is evidence-based medicine. And so are you this is more for Roger, but is similarly, Anuj, are we looking more as a med school to frame our education in a way that we're being taught how to find information and how to find evidence-based information, as opposed to just learning the information itself?
Yeah, I think absolutely and very much that's the case. I think it's always been the case in medicine, but it's even more so now. I remember sometime last century, probably in the 1980s or the 1990s, one of the clinical teachers talking to the third year class before they were about to go into their fourth year. And he said, one of the important things for you throughout your medical training is to learn how to learn how to evaluate information and to make decisions. And you should recognize that at least half of what you're being taught now will be out of date, wrong, or completely superseded within the next 5 years.
Mm.
And that probably is speeding up from what it was back then. So if we were to say, you know, what I'm teaching you in this lecture, you must know, actually probably, let's be charitable, 20 or 30% of it maybe you must know as a foundation to be able to evaluate. The rest of it can go by the board. So we constantly need to be reviewing the curriculum and saying, what can we get rid of so that the essentials of how to be able to evaluate knowledge and assess it critically is still in the curriculum. And also to know what you don't know. I mean, if you're making your judgment on false premises, then that's highly dangerous. If you know that you haven't got the background knowledge, then you go and find it. And if you don't know how to find it, then you're stuffed. So you need to know how to find it. You need to know how to evaluate it. And you need a little bit of fundamental background in order to do that, but probably not as much as we've got in our curricula at present.
Mm-hmm.
Now, it's sort of just going on what Roger mentioned. It's sort of moving up the pyramid, which is the Bloom's taxonomy, that you've done your knowledge acquisition at school. You've done that in perhaps MedSci 142 if you've graduated, you know, from you've done your first year or have exposure to first year at University of Auckland. And then your year 2, there is a bit of learning that needs to be done. But year 3 and 4 and 5, it's more about synthesis, analyzing. It's about, you know, processing, evaluating, and going up the education pyramid. And I think that's when students go into the clinical field, there's not much that people are taught per se. It's all about application of what they've done in year 2 and 3. So I think the more we start doing that, and that's exactly what's happening over in Australia, as well as in the UK and the US for that matter, that people are trying to do a lot more of these flipped online learning, case-based studies, problem-based learning, which is students take responsibility, they view information at different sources, could be electronic, could be given as a piece of paper. And that's where they start sort of having that sort of skills of acquiring information and learning by themselves.
Mm-hmm. And a lot of that evidence-based medicine, though, does come from being able to understand quantitative research. And a lot of that in this day and age requires some form of computer skills. So is that those sort of computer skills, are they what is taught in those extra kind of modules in other universities such as Harvard and stuff, or are they in any medical school curriculum?
I mean, I think it sort of is quite different in the US because you get into med school after a graduate entry. So you're graduate entry only, so which means you've done a basic BSc degree. But if you were to go, say, for example, University of Sydney, and you were an undergraduate student there and you got into med school there, you would have to do a module. There is an e-learning module that they have where every student has to do one of those things, which requires right from doing Word and Excel to using searches and things like Google Scholar and things like that, and embedding YouTube videos. So that reminded me, YouTube videos.
But Holly,
Yeah.
I don't think that you actually need computer skills to evaluate data.
Mm-hmm.
And if you think about some of the things that you've learned in, for example, in some of the population health, what you need to understand is the importance and the significance of statistics. So you need to know what a mean and what various forms of variance are and what various forms of statistical tests mean when you can then analyze data, but you don't need to be able to do those yourself. I couldn't tell you the formula for doing a correlation coefficient off the top of my head. I don't need to, but I know that if a correlation coefficient is above a certain level with a particular sample size, then it's likely to mean something. If it's a huge sample size, then it may not mean terribly much if it's a very low correlation coefficient. So knowing that sort of way of evaluating data is more important than being able to do it, unless you're going into research, obviously.
Okay.
One of the things that, sorry, carry on. Yep.
No, you go first.
I was just going to say, because patients, as I said before, increasingly have access to the same data sources that you have. And your role as a doctor is to be able to guide them through those data sources if necessary, or be able to say, no, 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 that's actually a very dubious study. This is where the appropriate data is. Last year, there was a talk in the faculty that I didn't get to attend, unfortunately, one evening. I've forgotten who it was, and it was an American doctor who, Warwick Bagg, told me about it. He said the talk was called "The Patient Will See You Now." And it was about how patients increasingly come with a whole stack of potential diagnoses and background information that they've sifted from the internet. And your role is to be able to guide them through that and say, okay, yes, that's relevant. No, that's not. And this is why, and this is the direction I think we should be going. So the doctor becomes the expert in data interpretation or critique, rather than necessarily being able to have to search this from primary sources.
Do you think that we as medical students learn enough of that kind of literacy and being able to explain those sorts of things within our current curriculum? Because just given COVID and some of the stats and statistical modelling there, I know that it has been a bit of learning for myself, trying to actually understand what the data means, to be able to try and interpret it, to relay to my nana or people like that within the community.
Yeah, I think that's really important to recognise that that isn't just you, that's everybody. And one of the things that you come out of a tertiary institute with, and certainly in a medical degree, hopefully, is the ability to learn and pick up stuff and evaluate it. So like you, I didn't initially understand a lot of the subtleties of the stats around COVID. And then I did some reading, oh, okay, so that's the differential there. And that newspaper's crap because it's reporting the wrong thing. It's talking about a death rate as if it was a real death rate, but it's actually a case fatality rate, which is dependent on the number of cases that you've identified. And these sort of things that I didn't know initially, but just a little bit of reading and evaluating, oh yeah, okay, now I understand that. That's what you've got to come out with, because as I said before, knowledge is changing so rapidly. In 5 years' time, there'll be a whole lot of stuff we don't even know now that you're going to have to evaluate and come to terms with. And the short answer to your first part is, yes, I think we are teaching that through the medical program, but like anything, it's a spiral and you get more of it as you go on and you understand it better the further you go. And you don't stop at end of year 6, it's lifelong learning.
Sort of on a side note about COVID, do you guys think that that sort of statistical modelling and some of the data that was used is relevant to us learning for future sort of pandemics and things like that?
I've talked a lot. Yeah, Anuj, you can take this to start with.
No, I certainly, I mean, this is as Roger said, this is lifelong learning. We have learned so much from this. And I think it's all it has done is prepared us for what more to come. And I think just as the previous dean, I believe, Des Gorman, said in the newsprint that we weren't prepared for this. And I think that's, again, one of the things that there is so much information that's given out to us, and everybody was at 1 p.m. wanting to listen to what Dr. Ashley Bloomfield had to say and what was going on. So I think we, as a whole, we have right from not only our students, but also everybody in New Zealand have gone a little bit more aware, have become a lot more aware of what we have and what we need to do. So I think, answering your question, I think we will see a lot more of such sort of things being put down as in layman's term and reported to us in newspapers, and also we have champions within our faculty as well as in New Zealand who kind of are scientific advisors that will give us a lot more information. But I think I see we will change the way we operate, not only in terms of how we teach, but also how we operate day to day as well.
Mm-hmm.
Can I just add a couple more things there, Holly? The first is just a small correction, but Professor Gorman was not dean. He was
okay. Sorry, my bad.
Head of the School of Medicine for a
Yeah.
while. But I think I agree with you, Anuj, that any experience like this that we have as a society or as a professional body, we learn from. And one of the things that I've found really gratifying about the daily press conferences is that they're willing always to say, look, we're modeling, we're taking the best advice. We sometimes don't get it right. When we know we haven't got it right, we apologize and we change, because we can't predict with a lot of certainty. And if we think back 2 months, when we were just starting on an early exponential phase, we went from level 1 to alert level 2, and we were informed about the other levels. Within a couple of days, we had a whole bunch of people around the world, with scientific knowledge, saying we should, around the country, saying we should be straight into level 4 now. We shouldn't be, we need to go straight. And then we get into level 4, and then people are saying, no, we need to get out of this now. And so there's always lots of viewpoints. And the role of the professional with some degree of knowledge on how to evaluate is to say, yeah, okay, there's some validity in that, there's some validity in this. What are the likely predictions, and what can we learn from what we've done up till now? And then how can we best pace it? So, I think New Zealand's done extremely well. I think we've got a really difficult period right now, is to get away from the view that it's all done and we've got 0 cases, so it's all gone. No, that's not the case. And how do we manage from here on? And what do we learn from what we've done up till now? That's going to be valuable for the medical profession, for economists, for politicians, for everybody. And we all have to keep sort of just listening and critiquing.
Definitely. In that sort of regard, I know a lot of us have had our first round of open book sort of examinations. Is this a sort of concept that you think is a valid way of assessing students, given that we've just discussed that a lot of our learning is more these days about accurate interpretation of data and being able to find the information online?
Yep. Before I answer that, and before Anuj does, can I ask you a question? Have you done open book now?
Yes, I have.
Okay.
Completed.
How did you find that in terms of your anxiety levels relative to sitting in a exam room for a defined period of time in a closed book?
My anxiety levels were decreased, probably because I tend to feed off other people a little bit more. But I did find myself spending unnecessarily long periods of time answering 2-mark questions, because there's just so much of an abundance of things that you find that relate to that question that you just want to put everything down. So I really felt for whoever's marking those, because as Anuj said, some of us who have that kind of type A personality, yeah, there were some long exam scripts turned in, I'm pretty sure.
Yeah, well, certainly I think that open book exams change the expectation that students have of what they're required to do. And your experience, I think, has been mirrored by a lot of students thinking, if this was a 2-hour exam and I've spent 6 hours on it, what am I doing wrong? It's just that the expectation is that I'm putting an expectation on myself that I need to consult widely in order to answer these questions. But to get back to your initial question there, which was, is this the way we should be assessing or maybe learning? Is it reinforcing particular ways of learning? To me, and it's something we've discussed a lot in the medical program in the last 6 weeks, students need to know how to access data. And as I said before, first thing, you need to know certain basic stuff. Second, you need to know what you don't know. Third, you need to be able to access the appropriate resources to find what you don't know.
Mm.
And so the 24-hour open book tests are assessing something a little differently from what we've done in the past, but they are potentially assessing some of that. Can this person find the information? And they can only find it if they've got certain adequate background knowledge to know what they need to find. And so, yes, it will reinforce the sort of thing you're going to have to do in the future up to a point. Anuj, what do you think?
Yeah, no, absolutely, Roger. I 100% agree with what you're saying, and also, so I ran. Other than the medical teaching, I've got a 400 class size of 400 students, and they also had to do an open book test. And as you can feel, the anxiety was huge. It was core physiology. But the only difference between your exam and the exam that these students did was that we only had 750 words. So they had to not only look for information and write an essay, but they had to write only 750 words. So you had to really pick and choose. And that sort of goes back to our learning objectives for a student of Auckland. A graduate needs to be able to communicate very effectively, which holds true for a medical student as well. Be able to have critical judgment in terms of what is right and what is this question asking, and have the knowledge base. So I think we tick that off, and I think students did find, much as you think that you've got the comfort home, and you don't have anxiety, which is really, really important. But at the same time, you have the anxiety of too much information. And as I sort of said in my session with the students, that it's kind of like a buffet. In a buffet, there is so much option, and I always end up having a tummy ache after having a buffet, because there is so much information, and there's only a limited size. You always have a dessert side of the tummy, which is not anatomically correct, but I'll go for it. But then you end up doing, as opposed to a bit more closed book, where you know where the specific things that are being asked. So like my stage 3 course, I asked them about heart failure and COVID-19, and it wasn't taught. The only thing that was taught was principles of heart failure, and then the students had to go and find. So I think it has brought a lot of, it was a bit of a challenge for us to develop questions and assessment that reflect that open book. So it wasn't only anxiety for students, but also for us as teachers. But it absolutely did do, I think we will still have yet to sort of analyze the results, but certainly did test the learning outcomes of what we wanted to do. So I think, yes, there is merit in having open book tests going forward. One of the things that I personally have learned from COVID-19 experience.
You're muted, Holly.
Yes,
Yeah.
We have a couple of questions that have come in. One is that, do you foresee technology and software becoming more a part of the role of a medical professional? And if so, should it be important for students and medical professionals to be comfortable with all sorts of software in order to effectively treat patients?
Anuj, you can start.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think, again, going back to, I think Roger put that point, it's the skills. I mean, software is different. You can't just learn a software and it changes, and we are learning. It's lifelong learning that we are doing. But I think the key thing with is the basic skills that you need. It's just more like sort of alphabets, and then you can make sentences and then go further if you wanted to. So I think that's the key thing, is learning those skills. What can the software do? What's the outcome? And as time goes, things are going to be, we're not going to use sort of clunky things. We are going to have more sophisticated software. And I think just the basics is, what do I need from this? And that aspect of or analysis, I think that's something that would be more useful to learn than actually the basic or the nuts and bolts of a software. Roger.
Yeah, I agree with that, Anush. And I was thinking as you were speaking that last century, when I learnt a new software package, I almost always had to have a paper manual beside me to consult. Oh, how do I do this? I need to look it up. 2 weeks ago, I got a trial version of something called Final Cut Pro X to edit the videos that I'm posting online for the students. And it doesn't come with a manual. And most of it was fairly obvious how to use, but there were some things I wasn't certain on. So I just quickly typed into Google and it came up with some helpful YouTube videos that took me through it. And that took very little time now. And so I didn't need to think, oh, I need a manual. I need to look up manuals for this. So the way you can learn software these days is a lot different from how it was. And software is changing so fast, there's little point in us including particular packages in the curriculum. It's more, as Anuj says, to be able to use them in a generic way is all that's required.
Absolutely. And I just also adding from my own personal view, just having some understanding of the software though is also important in terms of what algorithms are actually running, so that you can make sure you're not choosing biased data or biased research for what is the best quality of a certain medical application or something like that. Another question is, and Anuj, we kind of touched on this at the start of the discussion, but just what are the current challenges in integrating technology in university teaching, not just during COVID-19, e.g. pastoral care, labs, and online submissions?
What are the challenges? Okay, yeah. And I think the big challenge is we are so, I think, and especially the medical program, you got to see a patient when that rapport. And I think that's something that we all struggle with within this sort of Zoom. I think much as you think that it's brought us together. Roger is at Devonport, I'm in West Auckland, and I don't know where Holly is, and Steve is in a bakery. It's brought us together, but I think it's nothing like being able to engage with somebody face to face, be able to see when you're explaining something and that person, although they are nodding their head that they get it, but they don't get it, that, and then you can go and have different iterations. So I think that personal experience, learning experience, I think that is hard to create within this online learning environment. And then people are different, students are at different learning stages. Some like to do things being guided, if you like. Some like to experience that. So we are all at different levels of learning and stages of learning. And I think that can be done when you are in a space, you can work together. But I think online learning can be a little bit in that space, even if you're doing live. And I do find asynchronous learning, if you're not diligent and you're not driven to do it, and the drive to learn changes on it's a diurnal changes, because some days you feel a lot better, and in the mornings you're a lot upbeat than when you're in the afternoon or in the evening. And that, unless you have got a better control of control of your learning, these asynchronous learning tools such as lecture recordings, they get put away. And then when you get put away, they lose their relevance. And then suddenly, again, going back to my buffet, it must be dinner time. you just don't digest it well, if you like. And this is all for the stage 2 who've got their digestive module happening right now. And I think one of the other things is just, you know, those things are in some ways hesitance and also our own perception. This is too hard. Technology is too hard. If we had implemented online learning, if there was no COVID-19, I would say there would be a fair amount of resistance from the students. This is not how we learn. But because we were forced into this, it has made us learn a lot more about ourselves, how resilient we are at learning, how in control we can be with learning, and how we can all do quite a lot of things online, and the rich resources we as teachers have created. And I think, and also students. So I think these are, I think my, I might not have answered that question, but I think these are my pickup things, you know, some of the things that I picked up from my experience with online learning. Roger?
Yeah, I pretty much agree with what you've been saying. I think that one of the challenges for everybody is to recognize that no form of online learning is going to be the same as face-to-face. And I know I pause there because people might say, oh, but what about augmented reality, etc. What I was going to say is that this is two-dimensional here. And yes, I can see Holly and I can see Anuj. I can't see anyone else. And I can read their faces a little bit, but not as well as I could if it was face-to-face, because I can't see all body language either. And partly because it's two-dimensional, partly because there's no other cues going on here. There's no other sensory information available to me. And so we need to be aware that, yes, it can be an exceptionally good learning platform, but it has its deficiencies. And I'd reinforce what Anuj says, is recognizing the physiological components of our learning, and the fact that if I'm studying something for an hour, whether it be in a lecture or online, I can't take in all that information equally over that hour. And I can probably do it better in a lecture than I can in watching a lecture online, because of the additional supporting learning cues around that I'm not totally aware of in the lecture theatre. So if I've not been disciplined, as Anuj said, and I've got 10 lectures to watch, I can't do those in 10 hours straight. I can't even do probably more than 2 or 3 of them a day and get anything out of them. So just simply because of the ultradian rhythms of my body and how that affects my ability to take in and retain information. So I've got to say to myself, I can only do 2 or 3, maybe 4 maximum of those per day. And I probably need to review them after that stage as well. So once you get a backlog of stuff, you really begin to panic because you can't catch it up in a hurry. So it requires students to develop much more disciplined learning habits than they are if they're formally structured by others to say, turn up at this time, turn up at this time, turn up at this time.
Yeah, completely. So just to come back to the moot, we've basically established from you both that you are for technical literacy being taught, but at the basic level, most of us in our age group are brought up with it. And so that's not something that needs to be assessed or taught by the university. However, you do think that there is a need for us to be upskilled, perhaps to use that word, in being able to evaluate information and evaluate research so that we can relay that and to our patients better. Am I correct in that kind of summarization?
Yeah.
Yep, definitely.
Agreed.
And you've both found challenges moving to the completely online format. We have the last question is kind of suggesting that, do you think med students should learn a bit of programming? We kind of touched on it earlier that we don't, Roger, your position was we don't need to learn how to program, but more how to interpret the outcomes, do you think that would you change your mind in thinking that students should be able to understand how to get the data and use the data ourselves?
Maybe sometimes how to get the data, but it'll depend on what you're going to be doing. And a lot of students aren't going to be necessarily doing medical research. They need to be able to evaluate rather than get data. And you don't need to be able to program to get data. You just need to be able to use some of the statistical packages, which you'll learn if you're doing research. I think that there isn't any, to my mind, I mean, and I do a lot of programming and I love it, but I wouldn't feel that it's something that you need to teach medical students, because it changes so rapidly anyway, the different languages, and the computer scientists will handle that. Just as I think it's useful for medical students to know about microbiological tests and what they tell you, and maybe have seen one, but do they need to be able to do street tests and whatever else? No, not unless they're going to be working in a lab. It's nice to know, and it would be nice to have if we had an unlimited amount of time, but we don't. So we've got to censor those things and say, other people can handle that. You guys are the specialists in interpretation.
Okay, thank you. And I mean, I'm a third year, so I don't really know. So by the time sixth years graduate, do we as a university have some way of assessing how they feel about their competency with accessing electronic health records and using those sorts of programs that are available?
Yeah, I think if they can't do that, they don't graduate. Because through their 3 years in principally in hospital and general practice apprenticeship teaching, they're learning to use Concerto and things like that, depending on what hospitals are using, and they become second nature.
Perfect. Cool. So do you guys have any other additional comments? I think we've just about covered most of it.
Not from me. What about you, Anush?
No, I think we had a good korero, and I think that's really important. And I think what I would like to congratulate the students is taking on board. It was so new and so different, and all those sort of young, year 2 students who had got into med school and all excited, and suddenly we had COVID-19. And they were going to have all online lectures and online labs. I think it's just embracing the new change or the change, and then coming out of that change to see the new normal. I think it's really, I suppose, has taught all of us, and especially the students, is to have such a structured, and I hope they will be after this experience, is how one can structure and can use or leverage sort of e-learning, if you like, loose word over here, or electronic ways of learning in a more effective and strategic way, so that you can have a more sort of immersive learning experience, a more enjoyable learning experience. Roger.
All right, cool. Thank you both for coming and chatting with me this evening. I think my biggest takeaways are to keep learning how to learn, and keep learning how to evaluate all the information that's out there, and using my own brain, which is being stimulated taking this degree, to be able to interpret data and do all the things that everybody else does. So yeah, thank you very much.
Thank you.
And I guess that's where we can say goodnight, and thank you to everyone who was watching and submitted questions.
Thanks to everyone for participating.
Thank you. Thanks,
Thanks,
Roger. Bye.
Bye-bye.